Up front tonight, should virgins be allowed the joys of motherhood, or is it immoral?
And the jobless, who pays the price of retraining? Please join us at 10:40.
This is Granada, and now the news from ITN.
Vote against me and chaos will follow. Savouring freedom as police restart the hunt for the bombers. Johnny Walker home tonight after 17 years. Ethiopians face famine as the harvest fails again. And Yugoslav partisans prepare to fight, the president resigns. Good evening. The Soviet president, Mr. Gorbachev, appealed to voters to give him a yes vote in the referendums being held this weekend on maintaining the Soviet Union. He said the country faced upheaval of unprecedented proportions if the people voted no. Mr. Gorbachev made his appeal in an unscheduled address to the nation. He said the vote was one of the most important moments in Soviet history. His main rival, the Russian president, Mr. Boris Yeltsin, tonight urged the people to vote against Mr. Gorbachev.
Mikhail Gorbachev welcomed American Secretary of State James Baker to the Kremlin today for the first high-level superpower encounter since the Gulf War. But as they settled down to talk about the Middle East and arms control, Mr. Gorbachev was preparing to deliver to the Soviet people an impassioned plea for support in Sunday's referendum. It contained a warning that the breakup of the USSR would have consequences reaching far beyond its own borders. On television tonight, he declared, the point at issue is the fate of our country. A yes vote would pave the way for radical renewal. If the vote was no, all will be losers.
Это была бы не только наша с вами беда. Распад державы, которая сегодня является одним из устоев современного мира, повлечет, чреват всеобщим потрясением, я бы сказал, небывалых масштабов.
Voting has started in the 6 republics where the referendum is being boycotted by local governments which have already declared independence. In Boris Yeltsin's Russian Republic, there's no boycott, but voters will also be asked to approve the idea of a democratically elected president. That would give Mr. Yeltsin the power base he needs to challenge Mr. Gorbachev. Mr. Yeltsin today called for a no vote in the national referendum. It seems he's on a collision course with the Soviet leader.
It could take different forms. Electoral collision and the Civil War too.
Mr. Gorbachev has more pressing problems than Boris Yeltsin. He's facing growing unrest and opposition across the country. And he left no doubt today that he knows the stakes on Sunday will be high. Tim Hewitt, News at 10, Moscow.
The Ukraine, the breadbasket of the Soviet Union, provides half the food consumed by the entire country. And that's why these Ukrainians, brimming with agricultural produce, have to be persuaded to stay in the Union. Trust me, Mr. Gorbachev saying, and in this village, untouched by Moscow's radical reformers, they do. To a man, they all say they'll vote yes in the referendum. God created the Union, and it will never die, say the village babushkas. The soil is rich, the harvest plentiful, and if they vote to keep it for themselves, it will force the empire's breakup. But the greatest natural resource in this region is coal, and the miners have turned their back on Mr. Gorbachev. Despite promises, working conditions have not improved in 60 years. These men toil underground to produce a quarter of Soviet coal, and the command economy gives them nothing back. Their life expectancy is 52 years. Strike action has now closed a fifth of these pits. It's a warning to the president that the battle for these resources is just beginning.
Nothing's changed for the better. We'd be much better off outside the Union, fully independent.
Referendum posters urge Ukrainians to support the Union, but the promised economic reforms never came, and the suspicion is, in the Union, they never will. Mr. Gorbachev hopes that Sunday's referendum will reaffirm the Union and the economic ties between the 15 republics and Moscow. But even here, in a heavily Russianized part of the Ukraine, the workers are beginning to resent the fact that Moscow needs them more than they need Moscow. Penny Marshall, News at 10, Donetsk.
After the release yesterday of the Birmingham Six, the new inquiry by the West Midlands Police into who was responsible for the Birmingham pub bombings is now underway. Devon and Cornwall Police say their investigation into West Midlands' original handling of the case is well advanced. The Lord Chancellor, Lord Mackay of Clashfern, has responded to criticism of the judge who rejected the men's first appeal 3 years ago. In a rare public statement, he said he had the fullest confidence in Lord Lane.
A walk in the country for Hugh Callaghan, a simple pleasure, but one that's been denied for more than 16 years. Richard McElkenny with his daughter and a granddaughter born in 1987, around the time the last appeal failed.
Everybody's got big grins on the face. They're all sitting around smiling at each other, you know. The atmosphere in there is really lovely, everything's relaxed. And everybody's just enjoying being together. It's really, really nice.
Their lost years will certainly entitle them to compensation as statutory right under the 1988 Criminal Justice Act. They'll probably get around £200,000 each. Since April last year, Devon and Cornwall Police have amassed more than 1,500 registered documents relating to the case. Some are more than 1,000 pages long. They're continuing with inquiries into police malpractice, out of which charges may arise.
Those investigations are well advanced. However, we must wait the outcome of the final judgment and any recommendations it may contain.
The Chief Constable of West Midlands, 3 officers from the force who questioned the men are still serving, spoke of the investigation.
And if they need to be taken before a court, then so be it. If there is a disciplinary matter, I will address it. But I think they are entitled to the same dignity as anyone else. And I make the plea yet again that the pressure that was criticised in terms of the furor of public feeling in 1974, let's not repeat that in 1991.
Calls for the resignation of the Lord Chief Justice, Lord Lane, who turned down the 1987 appeal, were fiercely rejected by the Lord Chancellor today. That appeal was reconstructed by Channel 4. Many observers were alarmed by what Lord Lane said.
The longer this hearing has gone on, the more convinced this court has become that the verdict of the jury was correct.
Today, the Lord Chancellor, Lord Mackay, took the unusual step of issuing a statement. He said, "I have the fullest confidence in Lord Lane's integrity and judicial qualities. I consider calls for his resignation as wholly unwarranted." The team from West Midlands Police are now following up leads on who actually was responsible for the bombs. Last year, in a drama documentary, Granada Television named the men they say committed the atrocity.
For one of the 6, Mr. Johnny Walker, the celebrating began all over again when he arrived back in his hometown of Londonderry. There were tears of happiness as he hugged grandchildren he'd never met before. Thousands stood in the rain and cheered him.
Hugging a grandchild he'd never seen, Johnny Walker was back in Ireland for a homecoming he could never have imagined. This was the start of an emotional, chaotic return home, a kind of triumphant progress by bus, stopping off to greet well-wishers. And on into Londonderry, a city he left so long ago, providing the warmest welcome of all. Now he knew he was really home. Thousands turned out to see him and mob him in the Bogside. For a time he was almost lost in the crowd. More hugs for his daughters, but the strain was clearly showing. He'd had little sleep. The last few days had drained him. Protected now from the crush, he made his way to the home of more relatives nearby and an opportunity to express how he felt.